Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show here on ChannelOne television. On The Point of View, we get the right guests, ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. We have a very interesting show for you tonight, and it's been a week and a few days since the majority leader in Parliament announced that the Kotoka International Airport will be renamed Accra International Airport. Tonight, we have a historian to bring us historical perspectives on the man Kotoka, on the circumstances surrounding the naming of the airport after him, and also some issues around renaming generally. Stay with us. Welcome back. So on the National Fugu Day, the Wednesday announcement, my guest is Kweku Darko Ankrah, who's a historian we know on the ChannelOne platform. Kweku, welcome to the show. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
So it's good to talk to you again. Usually when these discussions happen, people discuss from various perspectives. Why is it important for us to have a historical angle to these national discourses? Because even though it started in Parliament with the Mahama Yariga speaking and of course Apenyo marking, why is it important to situate these discussions from an important historical context?
Thank you very much. Because normally, when issues of this nature come, it tends to take political angle. And people often will argue based or from their own partisan prism. And as a result, they kind of, where I belong, this is where we stand. So those who normally are affiliated with the event will sort of try to defend it, and those who want that event to also be changed also come with their ideas. So then there's the need for historians to unpack this and try to show exactly what transpired, when with objective analysis of the situation, to let people judge for themselves whether the event and what is going to happen is actually right or wrong. So this is exactly what we are coming to do tonight.
So we cannot separate history from politics. I recall the name holidays, where under MPPs previously we had the August 4 as the Founders' Day, the scrapping of July 1 as Republic Day, the institution of Constitution Day for January 7. These are important conversations because there's always some politics and also some history, right?
Yeah. So normally it is the politician that politicize history.
Okay.
The history is there. What happens? Why don't we ask ourselves that in other jurisdictions, what they started from the beginning, it is there. And then it reaches a time if there is a national agitation for the change to come, they also have the conversations about it and they effect the change as they deem necessary. So from the example that you gave, if for instance, everybody know the history of the country, that we know that political party was founded in a specific day of, let's say, 4th August 1947. And that does not mark the Independence Day. And so everyone knows this history, and then let's say you are going to give another day, which is a political party's formation day, as a national holiday. Then this is not history. You are sort of politicizing the period. But if it's 6th March 1957, whether you belong to the political party that was in power that day, it is a national celebratory day where, irrespective of your political party, you got independence and we must move forward.
Interesting. Of course, I remember the last time I spoke to you about the renaming, there was a discussion about naming the University of Ghana after Kweku Darko Ankrah. And then a lot of controversy. And I think you had to give some history around his role in the setting up of the name. I didn't recall that much controversy when UST was to be named KNUST. Why the difference? How come when UST was to be named Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, we didn't hear a lot of controversy, but when some people proposed under the previous administration that UG be named after JB Dankwa, what's the difference between those two?
So the difference is that normally people want association with how the things came about. So if you look at Nkrumah's role in the KNUST, one, though the original idea of having a second university was part of the colonial objective, and during this time when it was being touted, Nkrumah was also around as a prime minister. So even though the British has not left and colonialism was still with us, Nkrumah, then we wouldn't say there was a total autonomy for the country or the British have total control. No, because the prime ministership or leadership has changed hands. We have gone to election in 1951 and Nkrumah has been elected to become the leader of government business, and as a result he was the one in the management of affairs, despite the fact that the British have the governor general serving as someone whose opinion must be sick at all times in trying to come out with policies. So he must give consent to some of these policies as well as laws that we roll out. It is without question. So the idea of a second university was in tandem with what had already happened to Legon being founded, because when Legon was being founded, one of the things that Asante Hene raised was that since the Ashanti's cocoa money is going to be a chunk of what was going to be put into building University of Ghana, if any other idea of a second university should come, it should be placed at Kumasi. And I think Asante Hene made a very important argument, which the colonial government as well as Nkrumah himself as a leader of government understood. So when the idea of second university came, because ideally people would think that Cape Coast is the center in terms of education, so the second one should go there. But Asante Hene also made his bid, a very forceful one, and he was right that chunk of the cocoa farmers were coming from that enclave, and as a result, when the idea of a new university came, the Kumasi Technical University, Technology College, that was the first original. The Kumasi Technology College was booted. Then it came, and it was under Nkrumah. It was during Nkrumah's tenure as a prime minister, but as I said, it's a colonial project. Then over the year, there was a need for expansionism, and within the expansion, Nkrumah contributed as a leader of the country until the university, the college, finally reached its fully fledged university status. All this was done under the Nkrumah's tenure as a president of Ghana. By 1960 going. So this shows that Nkrumah is really affiliated to the bringing up of the university, how he contributed towards its movement from Kumasi Technology College to become a fully fledged university.
So there was no controversy around Nkrumah's role at Tech. Which is why when the name KNUST was proposed, there wasn't much of a...
Yes, because what is there to go and argue about? Okay, maybe people could have said that, okay, let's give it to Prempeh because Prempeh was also part of it. But in terms of bringing up of the university and how it became a fully fledged university, this was solely Nkrumah's effort.
So, but how different was that from JB Danquah and Legon? Legon is not the same, right? Because
it's not the same because JB Danquah actually supported Techi Benson, who raised this issue as the Gold Coast Legislative Council as a second speaker. Okay. When Techi Benson raised the idea as a leader of the African group in the Legislative Council that there is the need to name the university, or the need for the university to come about after the Elliott Commission report and how it was overturned and they fought for it to be returned back as one university for the Gold Coast. He made that effort. Okay, when he spoke, he was seconded by Professor Charles Christian Gonsalves, who also spoke that there is the need for it and that cocoa money should be used. And then Danquah, who spoke third, seconded what the two have said and also re-echoed what Gonsalves Baita have stated in terms of leaving the cocoa farmers and go back. Because historically, when it was being written, people went and took the legislative Hansard and then they quoted only Danquah's version. People often think that he's the one who mooted the idea, but the downside of at that time 1948 is there. So even after that, for the university to come, it didn't end there. They have to form the Bradley Committee. It was Bradley Committee that showed where the university should start, the finances that needed and everything before it became. And that Bradley Committee, Charles Techi Benson was involved. Danquah was not even part of it, of how the university was to be constituted.
But why was Kotoka the principal person the airport was named after?
So what it happens was that during the coup, okay, the abortive coup, which was done by 120 armed reconnaissance squadron at Reki Regiment in Togo. Who? It was led by Sergeant Samuel Atta, and then Yeboah, Moses Yeboah, and then they have Osepoku with them. So they actually mooted this idea, and some was argued that the junta under Colonel Asase at the Parachute Division at Tamale, as well as Major Achab, were also, even then Major Asante were also involved. But over the years, we went during the court martial, they were not involved. They were actually, so it became these three principal members, okay, Osepoku, and then Yeboah, and then Atta. So in the course of it, first they came to Accra, and then they were able to overcome the Flagstaff House, which then used to be the how do you call it,
the seat of government.
Not the seat of government then. It has become Ghana Armed Forces, their headquarters. So they went there, and then they saw first they killed Kotoka in the crossfire when they met. When they proceeded to, how do you call it, the airport, the Flagstaff House. It was there that they killed Kotoka's Batman, which is Say Grunsi. So it was Say Grunsi. And they killed him, and then they proceeded. While this was going on, Captain Avevo heard it, and he wanted to go in, and he was also shot. Okay, and so that's how they killed him. And then later they killed C.Y. Bokuro, who was also there around that time. So
was Kotoka killed at the airport?
So Kotoka's bullet-ridden body was found there. There, that it was near what is now the forecourt of the airport. There, it was there close to the road. So that's where later they found him after the coup was aborted. So from there, then they proceeded to airport. GBC, and then to the seat of government, which is the Christabon Castle. So at the Christabon Castle, that was where Ankrah was there. Osepoku went there, but before they could grab Ankrah passed through the window and jumped into the Atlantic Ocean, and then swam all the way from the castle end and went ashore.
Are you serious?
And fled. Yes, that's what General Ankrah did.
So this is the NLC, Ankrah, Efrifa, Kotoka, being the three architects of the Nkrumah downfall. Ankrah swam.
And at that time, the only member
General Ankrah.
Yes, that's
he swam
all the way through the sea. He's a gunman, and so he's a fisherman.
This is recorded history.
This is a recorded history. So he swam,
so
and
the Kupis couldn't get him because he swam.
Yes, he swam and he went away.
Amazing.
That is why Osepoku was not shot, because he didn't kill like Atta and Yeboah. I get to the point. So he fled ashore. But at that time, Afrifa was the only one who was not in Accra. He was in Tamale performing a national duty. So the coup, the people then went to the GBC, and they announced that they have taken reins of government, and that in the crossfire they have been able to capture Kotoka, and he has been killed. Unfortunately, counter attack was made, and they were able to apprehend the coup makers. And that led to their being arraigned the court martial.
I see. So after you were court martial, and then they were obviously executed.
Yeah, committee, yeah.
So the leader of the government at the time was General Ankrah.
Yeah, it was General Ankrah.
So he survived.
He survived.
And Efrifa also was not touched.
He was not,
because he was not in Accra.
He was not in Accra.
So Kotoka was the only person who fell of the three.
Of the three.
I see. So which government decided to name the airport after Kotoka then?
So he fell in 1967, okay? So when he fell, this became a moment of, national mourning, because people felt that they have been able to overthrow Nkrumah, and whatever anti-democratic agenda or the way they want to remove him democratically, if they didn't have opportunity to do so, these people were seen as liberators of the time, particularly by the opposition of the time, who realized that without any artificial mode of changing the leadership, there will be no need, there will not be opportunity for them to come. So they were also involved. Most of them have become members of the NLC. And so when the idea was mooted about how to commemorate the sudden pass of General Kotoka, what they thought of is that to do something to kind of immortalize his memory for what he did to overthrow Nkrumah's regime. And so they came out with the General Kotoka trust decree. And trust decree had a lot of people. Okay.
So this trust decree was 1969.
Yes.
NLC decree. So this was still under the Efrifa Ankrah government.
Yes.
This was before Buzia came.
Buzia later came on to codify it democratically into an act in 1971.
So the NLC decree that you refer to, we have extracts here. I have some very interesting names, which maybe we can go through here. So the creation of the trust is established a trust known as General Kotoka Trust Fund.
Yeah.
It shall be a body corporate with perpetual succession and a common seal, and may sue and be sued in its own name. Now, the trust shall have the power to acquire, hold, and dispose of any movable and immovable property. Now, I wanted to show you a couple of things. The patrons of the trust are listed. I'll ask you a question about them. Yeah. So let's go to the patrons of the trust. Then I'll come to the board of the trust, board of trustees, before we come to the objects of the trust. So patrons of the trust: Lieutenant General J. Ankrah, chairman of the National Liberation Council; Mr. J.W.K. Halley, vice chairman of National Liberation Council and IGP. Do you know who this man is?
Yes, he was one of the those people. He was the inner circle of the people who organized overthrow Nkrumah.
And he was the IGP at the time of the overthrow.
Yeah.
So he continued as the vice chairman of NLC, as an IGP.
Yeah.
So he's from the Volta region, correct?
Yes.
Then there was Nanase Oseajiman Prempe II, KBE Asante Hene.
Yes.
Ni Amugi II.
Yeah.
That will be the government chair.
Yes.
Nana Oforiata II. That will be the Ochihene.
Yeah.
Then there's Asantilo Sandemanab, Vice President, Upper Region House of Chiefs.
Yes.
Nana Utu the 11th, Abakrampahene.
Abakrampahene, that's the chief of Abra.
Nana Kusi Apia, Omahini of Wenchi.
Yeah.
Togbe Ajatekpo the 6th, Paramount Chief of Abatime. Mr. J. A. Brima, Kanyen Sura.
Yeah. He used to be a member of Nkrumah's regime until he was found for bribery, Brima Committee of a bribery allegation.
So he was a member of the NLC.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So he was of the Northern region. And Nana Kwamina Anesi the 4th, Paramount Chief of Dutch Secondary.
Yeah.
So these were the patrons.
Yeah.
Then there's also the Board of Trustees, which I want you to comment on. Mr. Justice Niama Olenu.
Yeah, Justice Niama Olenu was in the Supreme Court. He was in the Supreme Court during Nkrumah time. They appointed him by the colonial regime, and this is a man who was also he was part of the nationalism agenda. He at one time became the general secretary of Buzia's party, Ghana Congress Party. He became the general secretary. He became a member of NLM. Okay. And prior to that, he's a staunch opponent of Nkrumah. Okay. That he was one of those people who took Nkrumah to Galmanches Palace. That he's not coming from Accra, and he has no right to contest the parliamentary seat at Chiedu Keteke, now Odudu.
So that's Niama Olenu.
Niama Olenu.
There's Mr. Daniel Chapman Yaho.
Yes, so Chapman Yaho is also somebody who was how do you call it, diplomat and sort of.
I see. Yeah. Then there's Solicitor General, Auditor General, Director of Legal Services, all ex-official members. Then there's Miles Hagan, a member. Mrs. E. Akufuado, a member. Mrs. H.S. Bannerman, a member. And then a couple of ex-official members. So it looks like this was well set out. So there were the patrons who are like the high level, then the board, and then they now have the objects, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. Maybe let's read that. Yeah. The renaming of the Accra International Airport, Kotoka International Airport, after the late Lieutenant General Emmanuel Kwasi Kotoka, without any financial burden being placed on the trust fund. That's the first object. Second, the naming of an army barracks, Kotoka Barracks, after the late General Kotoka, without any financial charge being placed on the trust fund. See, the erection of a statue of the late General Kotoka as a warrior in full battle dress at the spot where he fell near the Accra International Airport, and the creation of a quiet garden in the area surrounding the statue. That's C. D. The acquisition by the trustees in favor of the trust of that portion of land situated at the Accra International Airport where it is proposed to erect a statue
Yeah.
of the late General Kotoka and to create a quiet garden to surround it. E, the provision of tombstones for the late General Kotoka and other gallant soldiers who fell during the insurrection of 17th April. F, the acquisition and furnishing of a house at a total cost not exceeding 17,000 cedis for the widow of the late General Kotoka, Madame Monica Kotoka, for life, and thereafter in equal share to her children by the late General Kotoka, whose names are set out in the first schedule. And then the acquisition and furnishing of a house, the amount is listed for the widow of the general, and also for Madame Ethel Nokai Kweno for life, and thereafter to her children. Then the acquisition and furnishing of a house at a total cost not exceeding 10,000 for the widow of the late Captain C.Y. Boklo, Madame Vera Enyonam Boklo for life in equal share. And then the same is done for Captain A.K. Avevo's widow, Madame Noviegbo Akume, and then Ako Damoji and Mabel Osai. So this will be the widows,
Yeah, the widows.
of Avevo. So Avevo had multiple wives. And then there's also a house for the mother of the late Sergeant Osei Grunshi, Madame Tampori Grunshi. And then there's other things they list there. So it was a very elaborate, which means that the trust, even though Kotoka was the main beneficiary, there were other beneficiaries too.
Yes, so the intention was, as for Kotoka, it was to immortalize it because it was there were three leaders, then heading that NLC. You know, when they do coup, they do their own council, and the council members, the leadership. And for the military phase, you have General Ankrah, you have the Kotoka and Afrifa. They were the major phases because they believe in those the military and the respect that it have. So in fact, Ankrah was not part of the coup. So was Kotoka. Kotoka originally was so was Afrifa originally.
Really?
So Halle, the coup, and Kotoka, and there are other conspirators. And later
So
they
the 66 coup, Harley, IGP, Deku, and Kotoka were the
Kotoka
key.
and others, the few people believe that because they wanted to look so how do you call it, national. Other than that, they will look like the airways were the one who was staging the coup. So the idea of trying to move away, if you read Soldiers and Military and the Soldiers in Ghana, book by Simon Bayham, you talk about this analysis, okay? And then in that work, you talk about the military, how to sort of de-ethnicize some of the military structure. So Afrifa came in, and then...
So Afrifa was from?
Afrifa was an Ashanti, okay? Then you have Ankrah. Ankrah was suggested, according to if you read the book by Justice A.N.E. Emisa. He said when they were going to speak about the coup, they didn't even know much about what they were going to say about removal of Nkrumah. So he crafted
Ankrah.
Justice A.N.E. Emisa. He crafted. He's a Fanti Garman, okay? And he became Appeal Court Justice, and later Professor of Law, and became the head of University of Ghana Law School.
Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll go through this again. We are just trying to understand the history around Kotoka and then also link that to the renaming. We've read to you portions of the trust set up in 1967 originally, 69 originally, and then later on it became a bill. We'll now come to the controversy about the renaming and those who have been proposing for it to be named after either Kwame Nkrumah or some other significant national figure. This is the point of view. Don't go away.